How are you today? Welcome to my channel, Inside Real Estate, and today we're going to talk about affordable housing. Now, when I talk about affordable housing in this video, I'm not talking about housing that is affordable. I'm actually talking about the legal definition of affordable housing. And affordable housing, I think in the simplest way I can explain it, is housing that isn't sold according to market rates. Now, what does that mean? Well, normally when you have a house and you put it on the market, your goal is to get whatever price the market will bear, the highest price possible. But affordable housing isn't set up that way at all. When the affordable housing is built, they put a spreadsheet together and they figure out what they should charge for it. And it's usually a rate that's much lower than what the market rate would be. That's what makes it affordable. Now, there can be a lot of variances in this. Something that's affordable in a wealthy town is going to be quite a bit more expensive than something that's affordable in a town that is less wealthy or where the real estate is less expensive. Affordable is really relative to the community that the property is built in. So you can have very expensive, affordable properties. They're just affordable relative to everything else in what's selling in that town. So how affordable is this stuff? Well, it's not unusual to see this stuff trade somewhere between 20 to as much as 40% less than what the unit or house might get relative to if it was priced at market like other property. And while initially that sounds like a good deal, and it is, right? Like, I mean, your entry cost is very low. You do need to remember that when you sell it, you're going to be selling it at the same discount. Okay. That doesn't mean you're going to be selling it at the same price as the town goes up in value. Your unit, your affordable unit is going to go up in value, but you're not going to get an opportunity to capture market value except in rare instances where the property no longer qualifies as affordable housing. That's a rare case though, so I'm not going to talk about it too much in this video. I don't have a ton of time to do it. So the key things that you want to remember here is that affordable housing is very cheap relative to the town that it's in. It is not set at market price. The price is calculated on a spreadsheet and has a lot to do with where the house sold last and how much the town has moved up since. And the other things you need to know about this is that because it's not sold at market rates, there are lots and lots of people that want it. Let's talk about where this affordable housing came from, why it exists, and then at the end of this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can buy one of these affordable units. And maybe you can't, but if you can, I'm going to explain to you sort of what's involved as a typical process for buying them. So, where do these affordables come from? Well, builders have known for a long time that if they buy a piece of land, if they put one house on it, they can make a certain amount of profit. But if they put two houses or four houses on the same property, their margin, the amount of money that they can make, goes up quite a bit. So developers, as a general rule, are incentivized to put in what's called high density housing. Basically, they're incentivized to put in as many units as they can on as small a piece of land as possible because that increases their margin, that makes them make more money. But towns have zoning in place that specifically restricts how many units you can put on certain pieces of land. And on top of that, it was very common for developers to go in there and buy land and say, we want to do this with it, and for the towns to say no. Now, I'm sure that there were some other kinds of affordable housing, but affordable housing as a significant part of the market really started to take shape when Massachusetts passed its 40B laws. The 40B laws, basically what they were, is they're an override to local zoning that allows developers to put in high density housing in towns where there is not enough affordable housing or enough high density housing, depending on how they're calculating it, regardless of what the town zoning actually says. Now, it turns out that if you're going to apply for building permits this way, it's very, very expensive and time consuming, but the developers use it as leverage against the town to get higher density units put in place. And the towns usually let them do that because they're going to lose if they go to the state, and they're this way they can sort of control a little bit more what actually gets built. You can't really stop the developer from doing high density housing, unfortunately, or I shouldn't say unfortunately, but from the town's perspective, this is usually an unfortunate thing. But for everyone else who needs housing and recognizes that there's not enough of it to go around, this is a good thing. That is the purpose of the law, was to help create more housing options for people that live in Massachusetts. And for the most part, it works. Now, there is a condition, though. Usually, what the towns demand is that the developers dedicate a certain number of units based on the project. If they put in 100 units, it's not uncommon for them to do 10 units that are affordable. Okay. And if they want to take advantage of the 40B law, that's a condition of the 40B law. They have to set up these units that are going to be sold far below market rates. On the surface, this makes a lot of sense. By putting extra units on the property, the developer can make more money, but as part of making more money, he has to lose money on a few units, not too many, but a few, or make no money in order for the affordable housing to be created. So that's where it comes from. Okay. At the end of the day, most of the affordable housing that you'll see in Massachusetts is part of a larger community where it's off to the side or sometimes scattered throughout, but basically it's part of a larger development, and it was decided between the developer and the town, or the developer and the state, how many units needed to be there and at what price they were going to be sold. So that's how the affordables get created. Now, even though it sounds like a good idea, again, it's very important to remember that you're not getting in at a market price. And when you sell it, you're not going to get out at a market price. You're going to get out when you sell it at a price that is determined by the same spreadsheet that they used in order to determine the price when you bought it. So this housing functions a little bit differently than market rate housing. With market rate housing, you can buy something that's beat up, put in some elbow equity, right? Clean it up, fix it up, do some renovations, and you can make a profit on those renovations and build equity for when you sell the home later. Affordable housing doesn't really work that way because no matter what you do to the property, as a general rule, you can't sell it at market. You can't capture the benefit from doing that work. So, in that way, it's just very important to remember that you're kind of stuck with riding the town. As the town goes up in value, your unit will too. So, you do get to develop equity, but at the end of the day, you can't really improve the house in any meaningful way in order to change the price. Generally, expansions and the other kinds of things that you could do with unregulated housing, market rate housing, you just can't do. So that's an overview of affordables. And now we're going to dive into how do I find them and how do I buy them and the difficulty with doing that. So finding them is relatively straightforward. There just aren't very many. So if you take a look, you're not likely to find very many, especially if you're looking in too narrow an area. Generally, I recommend to folks who are looking for this kind of product that they cast a pretty wide net, 6, 7, 8, 9 towns to go look at the affordables. And the reason is even if you find an affordable, it may not be the right affordable for you. And by that, I don't mean that you don't like it. By that, I mean you won't qualify. Because in order to qualify for an affordable, typically the way it's done is the person who's buying it needs to be at a certain income level relative to the town. So it's not uncommon for me to see that the person's income level needs to be between 80% and 85% of the town median. Okay. Now, I'm not exactly sure where they get the town median income. I'm pretty sure that they get it from the IRS, but I don't know for sure. But at the end of the day, there's a limit as to the amount of income that you can have, and they make adjustments based on your household size, based on the number of kids that you have and the number of people in your household. And then from there, they have income limits for the number of people that can buy these houses. I would say 90% of the time, the people who call me about affordables simply don't qualify because they make too much money. These really are for people who are not making sort of an average amount of money. They have to be making a below average amount of money. But here's the tricky part. The tricky part is you have to be making enough money to qualify for a mortgage on the place. So in practice, your income needs to fall in this very small band between not making too much and not making too little. And it's not just about income. There are also other disqualifiers. If you have too much money in assets, like the market, or you own two other houses, those are not those are going to kick you out from being affordable. They really are looking for people who do not have a whole lot of scratch to put together. There are exceptions. Again, this process is not the same from town to town, and it's not even the same from unit to unit. A lot of it has to do with the parameters that they used when the affordable was built in order to determine how it's going to get. But the key here is what you need to understand is that your income is going to end up falling into a narrow band, and that's really going to determine which ones you qualify for. Despite the fact that there's not a lot of people that qualify for them, they're so inexpensive relative to the market that typically they get dozens of applications. So what happens? Well, most of the time when you're filing the application, and it's not unlike the process when you go to rent a unit, you have to fill out this application. This is similar, it's more paperwork, but it's similar. And then the town looks at everyone who's applying, and for the most part, they kick a lot of people out. They kick out people because they have too much income. They kick out people because they have too many assets. There's all sorts of reasons that they can kick them out, and that's usually what they do. And what's left are all the people who want it, and then and qualify. That's usually a very small subset. And then what they do is they take everyone's names and they put them in the hat and they pull out a winner and everyone else loses, which is kind of a bummer, right? That's not really how we want to do it. But the price you pay is fixed. You can't pay more for an affordable because the price isn't set by the market. The price is set by the town. So the good news is you're going to know exactly what you're going to pay. The bad news is these are typically very difficult to get, right? Okay, so if you've watched the video this far, hopefully you've learned quite a few things. You've learned where affordable housing comes from, why it doesn't sell at market rates, how you can apply, not specifically, but what kinds of parameters you need in order to apply, what's likely to happen when you apply. Again, this is not something you want to do in a short timeline. The town usually tends to market these properties for a long time until they have plenty of applications, and there's no guarantee you're going to win just because you qualify. So the stuff can be hard to find, it can be hard to win, but if you do get in there, it can be a great deal. So if owning a house is something that you want to do, if you want to get out of the rental trap, which so many people are in Massachusetts, this might be the right solution for you. And if you want to know more, hit me up in the comments. We'll see if we can figure out if you're a candidate for this or not.